Welcome everybody. This is session number 6, and today we talk about the art of dialogue. So, Professor Krishna, please, if you may.
Sure. We talked yesterday about the scientific and the religious quests for truth. And we said that in both of them, there were a lot of illusions that need to be cleared. Also in the scientific quest, there were a lot of illusions. People thought the earth was flat. That was believed for centuries, until it was found that it is really a sphere of large radius. They thought the earth is at the center of the universe and everything else revolves around it, and that it revolves in perfect circles because that divine matter is separate, different from our terrestrial matter, which is why a stone that is thrown on the earth doesn't go in a circle, but curves, and the divine matter, being perfect, goes in circles. All that was part of the illusion, but it was all believed for thousands of years. Now, in the same way, our mind in the religious field also has a lot of illusions. Illusion means that you are taking something to be true when it is not a fact of nature. It is just a construct of human thought, but you have accepted it, therefore it has become true for you. Or you're giving tremendous importance to something which is really not important in life. That's also an illusion. So both the quests are pointing out that there are a lot of illusions in our mind and in our consciousness, both in the scientific field, which deals with the external universe, and the inner field of our consciousness. So the quest for truth is to rid our mind of these illusions. And I talked yesterday about the scientific quest, the scientific method, and the scientific spirit. And we said that there is an international dialogue going on throughout the world among scientists who don't even know each other, but they all posit the reality or the truth as the unknown and do experiments and discuss with each other their outcomes in order to arrive at the truth. Now, Krishnamurti suggested a somewhat similar process for the religious quest. He was asked whether this religious quest means that we have to do it all singly, because I have to be watching my own consciousness in the mirror of relationship and so on. And that means it cannot be done in a group or in a community. And in response to that, he pointed out this way of having dialogue, but he gave to it a very subtle meaning, which is what I am going to talk about, the art of dialogue. If you are aware that our mind has a lot of illusions, which means the mind that has an illusion is not aware that it is an illusion. We may be aware of the illusion of the terrorist, knowing that his mind is caught in a propaganda, and because of all that belief, he is trying to kill and he thinks he'll go to heaven and so on. But we are not aware of our own illusions, just as he is not aware of his own illusion. He takes that to be true. Now, those illusions are not only religious beliefs given by the different religions, but also a lot of tendencies in the society in which we have grown up, which we unquestioningly accept. For example, the notion of success, that you must have a high-paying job and make a lot of achievements, then you are a successful man. Not true. That you have to be in competition with all your fellow colleagues and so on and outsmart them and come to the top. Not true. It is society's propaganda. And that creates a lot of disorder in consciousness because it brings enmity, it brings rivalry between friends, between people. In the same way, the feeling of nationalism, that because I was born in India, India is something very special. And my love of India means I think that Indian culture is the best, the Indian religions are the best, and so on. And I laugh at the other cultures and so on. Kind of narrow nationalism. It prevails very much all through society. And that divides because the other man is proud of his own culture in the same way, without even examining what all is really there in the culture, what part of it is healthy and what part is nonsensical. So Socrates said, an unexamined life is not worth living. We all respect Socrates and the Buddha and so on, Jesus Christ, but we are not able to live their teachings. Because we have all these illusions in our mind and we are not aware that they are illusions. So Krishnamurti suggested a means of dialogue of doing a group inquiry. Now, the first condition in that group inquiry is that you set aside your knowledge, because your knowledge contains all these illusions of your particular culture or your particular family's opinions and your own experiences and so on, and conclusions from there. And the knowledge divides. My knowledge is different from your knowledge. And if we are attached to our knowledge, then it divides us. So he suggested to put the knowledge in the background. You can't completely do that voluntarily. But if you are aware that knowledge is not important in this quest for truth, to find out what is true, it is not important both thought and knowledge, thought coming from that knowledge and opinions based on that knowledge. There is nothing very important about them because they are not truths. They are just ideas and they may be propaganda held in your mind, but you are not aware of that propaganda. So, can we sit together as friends, posit the truth as the unknown, being aware that our mind is caught in illusions, and talk it over based on our own perceptions in our daily life and our perceptions now during dialogue without bringing in too much of memory and experience and your past conclusions. I say not too much because you will use language, you have to use thought to communicate with each other. So certain amount of memory is necessary. But if you are aware of the danger of too much memory, creating division between us, and therefore I argue from my point of view and my experience and my conclusions, and you argue from your point of view and your conclusions, all of which we have been trained into in education. We have been trained to have debates where a group of people take side with one view and another group takes side with another view, opposite view, and then they compete with each other and somebody gives a prize as to who has won. It's like lawyers trying to, in a court case, trying to falsify to support their own client. And the poor judge, he is left there to sort out all these lies and come upon the truth. So if we can be aware that this process only deviates from the truth, that it's not important to attach oneself to a particular point of view about anything and assert that point of view or argue in favor of it as my view, then there is nothing sacrosanct about my view, because it's the view of a conditioned mind containing illusions. So how do we discuss? See, the illusions in my mind are somewhat different from the illusions in your mind. So we can help each other. I have my blind spots and I have my spots of clarity, and you have your blind spots, which are illusions, and your areas of clarity. If we talk to each other like friends, inquiring with a view to lighten up our blind spots, that's a very different approach from asserting points which you consider clear. Because you may think you are clear, but you may not be clear. It may be confused mind that is speaking. So it requires tremendous humility to begin with. And it requires that you have a mind which is not asserting its knowledge. So the knowledge goes into the background. Therefore, there is no hierarchy, because in knowledge there is hierarchy. The teacher knows more than me. So there is a hierarchy. In dialogue, it doesn't matter. There is no hierarchy. Even if the teacher is sitting there, he is not an authority for this inquiry. So we are sharing perceptions without owning them, just to inquire as to what is true and to discover if something is false, then instantly drop it, which requires no attachment to the known. You can drop it if you are not attached to the known. We saw yesterday that that's what the scientist does. He drops his theory the moment it is pointed out that it is false. He drops it because there is no attachment to the theory. What is important is not the theory. What is important is the fact, the truth. So in the same way, in the religious quest, Krishnaji suggested, posit the truth as the unknown. Be aware that your mind is conditioned, that it has illusions in it. Don't assert your own views, but discuss each other with respect, with affection. All that is a prerequisite for a dialogue. We find it difficult because we don't have such a mind. We don't have a mind in a state of dialogue. A mind that is in a state of dialogue is a learning mind. It can even be in dialogue with itself. And you find many of Krishnaji's talks in which he does a dialogue with himself, including the Sri Lanka talks where he talks about the Book of Life, 1948, I think. Very, very important talks. You can read them on the net if you haven't done so. You can have a dialogue with yourself because whatever you are seeing, you perceive that it creates a question in your mind. The source of the question is not important. The answer is also not important. The exploration is important. Take, for example, a question, is pleasure the same thing as happiness? What difference does it make to you whether that question is raised by Krishnamurti or by some other teacher, or you got it from the Upanishads, or a Christian book or Buddhist book, or your child came and put this question, or you got this question from your own experience in life? We have given tremendous importance to the source of that question. And we pay a lot of attention to the question when it comes from Krishnamurti, which is authority, which is giving authority. So if you are aware of that, it's an illusion to give a lot of importance to the source of the question. What is important is the question and your own exploration of that question, because in that exploration, you may come upon an insight and perceive a truth which you didn't perceive earlier. If you already perceived it, you are getting it from your knowledge. And that's one of the difficulties, to know whether it's coming from your knowledge or it is coming from perception. And it's important that it should be perception in the present. Krishnaji emphasized that even if it is an inquiry of yesterday or 1 year ago, and you have made it into a conclusion and put it in your mind, you are no longer free to look at it again. And it may be an illusion. So even all the conclusions of your own inquiry, you need to doubt. So there is a great importance to holding doubt. Now, you can't doubt everything. So you have to have that doubt on a leash. You have to be sensible about that doubt. Doubt also doesn't mean you are suspicious of everybody else. So there is an art of doubting. But you doubt your own conclusions. Otherwise, if you already know, what are you looking for? If you already know, you are not interested in discovering anything. So the ground of dialogue is to begin with from not knowing. Therefore, it doesn't matter whether there are 2 people or 20 people in a dialogue or even 1, because none of them is bringing in their knowledge and their illusions into the discussion. Then it's like putting 20 buckets of water, each bucket was empty. Then it doesn't matter whether you had 20 buckets or 100 buckets. So these questions as to how many people we should have in the dialogue and whether we should sit in a circle, whether somebody should coordinate the dialogue and so on, these are all very superficial, structural questions. If the mind is not in a state of dialogue, that means if it is not a learning mind, you won't have a dialogue. You will have only a discussion, an argument, and division in the group. Unfortunately, one of our conditionings is through our education that that thought is extremely important and analysis is extremely important. In this field, it is not important. It blocks perception. So if you have a lot of knowledge, it becomes a barrier to perception. That's why the so-called intelligent scientist is not necessarily the best candidate for religious inquiry, because his own intelligence of that kind and his attachment to argument and to analysis and so on blocks insight. So this inquiry in that sense is very different from the scientific inquiry, far more difficult because there is no method to it, and there is a lot of subjectivity entering into it. It's very difficult to be objective because you have to put yourself away. I mean, interestingly, I recently read a paper by Professor Ravi Ravindra, which is published, I think, in the April issue of the Theosophist, about the scientific and religious quest. And there he quoted Jesus Christ saying, "You must leave yourself behind, otherwise you cannot follow me." It's there stated by Matthew. And those of you who have not read his book called Science and the Sacred, I strongly recommend to you to get that book. It was published by the Theosophical Society and later on also by other publishers. So I'm sure you can get it on Amazon. So being aware of all this, you have to be aware of all this acutely in engaging in dialogue, because it's not going to be easy to put your knowledge aside and to keep your illusions at bay. But you can doubt your conclusions. Otherwise, you are not really looking for the truth. You are only looking for confirmation, for support, and all that, which becomes an ego process. So ultimately, again, the good old ego is the big barrier to insight and truth. So the beginning of dialogue is this awareness that you don't know, which is true humility. Not the humility of being servile, of feeling small in comparison to the teacher or somebody else. All that is hierarchy. But humility that you know, to know that you don't know, is true humility. The other requirement is total honesty and no attachment to your own view. You might say, well, that all means I must already be free, and that's true. This inquiry itself must be free from the ego. Otherwise, you cannot come to the ending of the ego through an inquiry which is itself egoistic. The means are the end. The end is not separate from the means. This is something which one needs to dwell on. You don't need to accept this, you have to dwell on it, the full significance of that statement. Through violence, you cannot achieve peace, and so on. So Krishnaji insists that learning does not even begin until you are free. Free from your own opinions, free from your conditioning, which doesn't mean your conditioning is absent or you have no opinions. Don't translate that. Freedom only means that doesn't dominate, that you don't have any preference or attachment to that opinion. Then you can drop it easily. So just as there is international dialogue in science about what reality is, and people respect each other and respect differences of view, in the same way, can we respect each other's perceptions? Doubting them doesn't mean you don't respect it. Respect doesn't mean that you have to agree to it. Respect, the true meaning of respect is when we use the word, you must, in the sentence, you must respect the feelings of another. That's true respect. It is part of care. It means you give attention, you care about that individual, which is part of love, part of affection. Not the hierarchical respect that we have been brought up with, that the teacher has to be respected, the elder has to be respected, the father has to be respected. So we have given to the word respect many meanings, hierarchical meanings. Those are not the true meaning of that word respect. The other man may criticize you. He may express disagree with you. To respect dissent means that because you are interested in the truth, therefore you are listening. You are not looking for support. When you are looking for support, you are approaching the whole thing egoistically. So the ego, you have to watch whether the ego is coming into the discussion. Whether you are comparing yourself with another, competing with the other, trying to outsmart the other, and so on, which is what we do in debates. There is nobody to be outsmarted. It is not important. It's not a race which you have to win. You're not trying to prove yourself to anybody or impress others about your views or your abilities. All that is egoistic. Because there you are concerned about me, me, me. That's the ego. Right. Then you can look at the issue impartially. Because the ego is partiality for the first person singular. My view, my country, my family, my attachments, my religion, etc. It becomes important in our consciousness because we have got attached to it and owned it. That is my religion, my family, my this thing. You can have a relationship with the family which is not one of ownership. Then it's not egoistic. It's only responsibility and affection. Then there is no ego in it. So this dependence, partiality for the me and the mind is the ego. You have to be watchful of that all the time, not only in dialogue, but throughout in life. That is why Krishna said it's hard work. It's not hard work in the sense that you have to achieve something, but it is hard work keeping your awareness intact, not getting distracted into all kinds of other channels, and be able to perceive from where you are coming, from where you are approaching the whole issue. That's the most important thing. And that needs to be done by every participant in the dialogue. Then only real dialogue is possible. Those of you who have sat in dialogues would realize that it is very important, very difficult to have this kind of dialogue. To open your heart to someone who is listening with affection and interacting with you. Krishna gave a metaphor which beautifully expresses this, though it doesn't necessarily explain it. but I'll tell you the metaphor. He said, it's like a tennis match. The ball is the question. I explore the ball and I send you my tentative comment with the ball. You look at my comment in the context of your own perception of the issue, and you return it with your comment. And this goes on, this game goes on until the ball is suspended in midair and the players disappear. The players disappear means pure observation is taking place without the observer. You are not important, so you go out of the picture. Only perception, only observation is taking place. Then what you see is the truth. So long as the me is there strongly, it is always coloring your perception, and therefore you don't see the truth. So the barrier is within oneself. And when you realize that, and if you are aware of that, not realize in the sense you are completely free from it, but you are aware of it, so you catch it very quickly when it comes into the thing, and you can set it aside because it's just an approach. You can change that approach. You can catch yourself making the mistake and correct yourself. But if you are not aware, you don't catch it. You go on and on and on and keep on just repeating that I am aware and I am. Then you are in a song. That whole thing is what the ego does. It defends like your lawyer defending his client. So no hierarchy, a cooperative, affectionate, listening to each other, positing the truth as the unknown, being aware that one has illusions and being eager to drop them. So no attachment to your particular illusion. That is the learning mind, and that is the mind in dialogue. If we don't have that kind of mind, you won't have a dialogue. A dialogue just doesn't mean that you come there and say we are going to have a dialogue. It won't happen. It requires this spirit of dialogue to be there. Without the spirit, no technique, no method, no device will turn it into a dialogue. But because the truth is the same for everybody, as much here as in science, therefore it is possible for us to look at the truth together. If we can set aside our own particular coloration by being aware of it. So that is what a Krishnamurti dialogue is. It's very different from the dictionary meaning of dialogue, which is simply an exchange of views or a conversation between two people. So Krishnaji gave it a much deeper significance for religious inquiry. And remember, it's always to be connected to perceptions in daily life. So next time you meet again for the dialogue, you have taken those questions which have come in the dialogue, you have looked at them in your own life, in your own consciousness, and you come back with your perceptions. Share them with your friends. So it's a group of inquirers like that who are all doing this separately, but coming together in order to share their perceptions. That's what dialogue is about, not about exchanging your knowledge and your views and so on. So I'll end it here, and maybe we can have questions and discussion, both about this and about what we talked yesterday about the scientific approach and the religious spirit. The two are not very different, because the learning mind, according to Krishnaji, is the true religious mind. He said that temples and mosques and churches are not religious places because there is no learning taking place there. But a school can be a religious place if it promotes this kind of learning, along with the learning in field of knowledge and so on. We'll talk about it when we come to the talk on education. Thank you. I'll end it here.
Sir, excuse me. Yes. Sir, if we may begin with yesterday's questions that I have them saved.
Yeah.
One of the question from Bhavin was, when you see the truth of something, how would you know that it's not an assumption?
You don't know, and it is not important to know. It is important to doubt that conclusion. So you don't live with conclusions, you live with questions. The learning mind lives with questions. The answers, the conclusions are not important. That's one of our conditionings, that we think that the answer is more important than the question. And we are all wanting to remember the answer to a question. That really prevents further inquiry or fresh inquiry. So Krishnaji dissuades us from doing that. It's good not to be sure about it. But I have a way of telling you about it, something that he has not said, at least I have not come across in reading him, that what's your consciousness? If it still has anger and jealousy and conflict and competition and rivalry and hurts, which are all very perceptible because they produce pain, then that perception is telling you, Krishna, you have not really come upon the truth. You may be having very good ideas about the truth. You may be able to express them well, but your consciousness is not free. So that, according to me, just as in science, we have a galvanometer to check whether a current is flowing or not. This is the galvanometer that tells you whether you have really come upon the truth. And if you have not, you have to engage in inquiry all over again afresh.
So to continue that, Deepika Chatterjee ji had a similar question. So what does it mean to go beyond the world to find the truth?
Precisely this. Perception is beyond ideation. Because perception is a more holistic thing. It includes all the senses. That is why he is all the time asking you to connect your inquiry with daily life. Otherwise, it tends to become an escape into a philosophic world, a virtual world in which of thoughts only, which is all a waste of time because it does not transform consciousness. Waste from the point of view of the man who is seeking the truth. Truth is at the level of perception, not at the level of ideation. So you're not trying to come upon a correct idea. That's easy to do. But it's also trivial. So I have a statement for you to look at, that only the trivial can be taught. The profound has to be learned for oneself. Think about it.
Thank you, sir. Sumitra ji had a question on perspective or perception. Does
Yeah.
perspective from which observation happens always affect what is observed?
Depends on the depth at which the perception takes place. You can have very superficial perceptions also. Then they don't lead to learning because the illusion is at deeper and deeper levels of your consciousness. And the perception has to go to that level if the illusion is to end. For example, superstitions are illusions which are at a very superficial level. They can go away even with scientific inquiry or intellectual inquiry. Then all these cultural illusions, attitude towards women, casteism, religious bigotry, belief, all this very vast area of cultural illusions, they are deeper. And still deeper than that are what psychologists call complexes, which form because you had a deep psychological experience, a hurt or a fear or sorrow in childhood, and the memory of that keeps coming up in life and disturbing you. That's deeper. And still deeper is the illusion of being a separate ego, separate entity, individual. The sages have pointed out that that is also just a construct of your own thoughts. It has no reality in nature. But you may never get to it. You may not come upon the perception at that level. So just begin from where you are and start clearing the cobwebs, the illusions that are there in the mind, wherever that inquiry takes you. This is not what Krishna has said, this is what I am saying. Yeah.
Sir, you just mentioned the begin from where you are. And Sudeshna ji yesterday had this question, what is the role of individual effort in transformation of their mind?
It's not the effort of will to change or to become something. It is the effort of learning. The effort of learning is not egoistic. The effort of changing or becoming something different is egoistic. That's why it is very subtle. Krishna says it's hard work. And at the same time, he says will is the essence of the ego. So it's hard work without using the will. We normally think of hard work as will and effort to achieve a result. That's our conditioning. Another conditioning which we had to set aside by watching very carefully is that we have been trained to always think in terms of what should I do, what should I not do. All religions have said that, do this, don't do that, this is evil, that is good, practice good, avoid the evil. And it has not worked. But the mind gets trained in that. Throughout your education also, that's the approach. Should I do this? Should I do that? And one approaches Krishnaji's teaching with the same kind of mind and creates a new morality out of it. Saying, Krishnaji has said, remain aware all the time. So you use will to remain aware all the time. Or don't believe in religion, don't go to temples, don't read too many books, it will add to your knowledge. So you're creating a new morality and practicing that with your will. And that whole thing is false. Krishnamurti has never said, do this, don't do this. Even if he has not meant that you have to do it with the will. He has meant that you have to come upon that through understanding, through perception, not through will. So That's a very common mistake which our mind makes. But if you are aware of this, you can watch that and catch yourself doing that, making that, once you know that it is false. Thank you.
So Rajuji was asking if this sort of conditioned brain is it from birth or not? Is the conditioning does the conditioning happen from birth?
Yeah, I understand that. Yes, the biological conditioning is from birth. For example, sexuality, the ability to learn language, all that is not there in the animal, it is there in you, and so on. So you have to know that there is biological conditioning. You can't do much about it because it's built into you. It's not created by your thinking, it's part of nature. So the question there is, what is my right relationship with this biological condition? What is the right place of sexuality in life? How important or unimportant is it? If you explore that question, you can come upon the right relationship with it, which is what Krishnaji meant by the art of living. The art of living is not to say, give up this, take to that, and so on, but to find the right place of knowledge, the right use of imagination, the right relationship with sexuality, with thought, what thought can do, what thought cannot do. Is wish the same thing as desire? When does it turn into desire? When does desire create problems? And so on. So that whole thing is the inquiry. And it is in order to come upon a certain balance, a certain right proportion, which cannot be defined like in science or in engineering, because there are no clear lines of demarcation. You will have to perceive that for yourself and learn about it. That capacity to perceive is intelligence in the religious field. And it includes compassion. Without compassion, there is no intelligence. Any conclusion that you come to only for your own sake, not concerned with anybody else, it's a limitation because you are not a separate individual. You are connected to the whole of human consciousness. So it requires that sense of what Krishnaji meant by you are the world, that we all share a common consciousness. So it's not a selfish inquiry into your own consciousness to solve your own problems, and so on.
So talking about art, today Rajesh ji have this comment that I'll just summarize it, that is the artistic model better approach to truth over a scientific model?
No model is important and no model is the right approach to truth. That truth is a very subtle thing. Therefore, you can't model it. I just explained that. When is it need and when does it become greed? What model is going to tell you? You will have to watch your own consciousness and come upon your own perception of that. How far to go into pleasure and when does that turn into addiction? Who's going to tell you that? How much to eat and when does it become overeating? Who's going to tell you that? You have to watch all this and learn all this, and that's the art. The art of living is to have the right balance and right proportion, not only in these physical matters, but also you need both reason and love, emotion. What is the right balance between reason, logic, and love? If a man is completely intellectual, rational, and so on, he can be very hard-hearted, cruel, like Hitler. If a man is completely emotional, he becomes neurotic, sentimental, all the time crying. That's also absurd. So what's the right proportion between the two? Who's going to give you the answer? Can a guru tell you how much, and can you measure? You can't. So you need to just observe all this with the question in your mind, and you will come upon the balance. Even bicycling cannot be learned from the book because it requires a balance. You have to get up on the bicycle, try it, you will fall a few times, catch yourself, but eventually you will learn that balance. Art is like that. And art, how to make a beautiful picture cannot be prescribed. There are no directions on how to make a beautiful picture. You come upon the sense of beauty in your consciousness, then the technique is important for expressing it. But the technique won't create that sense of balance or proportion. When everything is in the right proportion, it creates beauty. So that's why they say truth is beauty, beauty, truth. That's all there is to know and all that you need to know. This was Keats. He said that. These are very profound things which you can't get through analysis and so on. You have to feel your way through it.
Thank you, sir. So, question about dialogue. So today we talked about dialogue, and particularly in a group setting. And while that has its value, Vijay Anandji is asking, are there any requirements for a self dialogue, and perhaps the importance of self dialogues? That is what he is asking.
Both for the self-dialogue and for the group dialogue, the most important thing is to have a mind in dialogue. A mind that is in dialogue is not sure of its knowledge, is inquiring, is living with questions and not with answers or conclusions, is not attached to any conclusions, holds them tentatively, willing to drop them the moment it discovers it is false. All that is a prerequisite to a learning mind. We talked about it today. Prerequisite is honesty, perception, humility, to know that you don't know, and therefore you are really interested. You are listening not out of politeness, but you are listening because you are interested in listening to your friend, because that may clear up your illusions in your mind. So if you are really in quest of truth, that quest itself makes you listen to the other with respect. So there are a lot of prerequisites. They are there in dialogue with oneself too. If you take sides with a particular view, then you are not in dialogue with yourself. But if you look at both sides, if you can listen to both sides of the debate, not take sides, see the truth in the propaganda on one side, see the truth in the propaganda in the other side, see the false as the false, drop the false, retain the true. That is intelligence. You can learn even from Hitler's statements. So it is nothing to do with the level of that man. Many people are trying to assess Krishnamurti, whether he was a free man, whether he was perfect. then I will sit down and read his book and so on. This is nonsense. Whichever book you are reading, it is saying something. Can you listen to it and then investigate whether that is true or not? Neither accept it nor reject it. That is the learning mind. So when Krishnaji talks about listening, it is not just listening to him. He is also talking about listening to the bird, listening to the wind, listening to the child, listening to your wife in that way. It's a completely different approach, sir. A wholly different way of living from what we have been trained to do.
Sir, in that line of thought, Gayatri ji is saying that it seems that using the spirit of inquiry and observation in dialogues, K wanted all of us to realize that observer is the observed. And in a very different sense, is that not a method? I think that is what she's asking.
No. You see, our mind tries to look for a method. I said already that we have a strong conditioning asking, what should I do? And there is nothing in Krishnaji's teaching saying, do this, don't do that. He says, come upon love, then do what you will, it will be right. Now, love is a state of freedom from the ego. Love is where the self is not. But what we think of love is all illusion. We think of love as possessiveness, as attachment, as desire, as attraction. All that has nothing to do with love. So all that is also illusion. What we think of it, religion is not religion, not real religion. So if you read his book called Letters to Schools, it discusses the true meaning of all these words. If you have not read it, please read it and take it as a question. It's giving you the true meaning and the false meaning prevailing in society. What we call respect is not really respect. What we call friendship is not really friendship. So the mind is full of illusions. And you could look upon this quest as a quest for coming upon the deeper, truer meaning of every word, which is wisdom. Wisdom is if you live with the true meaning. If you will live with the superficial meaning, you are living with illusions. That's why it's a quest for truth. The quest for truth, which is self-knowledge, is the key to wisdom.
Now I must apologize that there are questions that seem that have been covered before, and so I'll to best of my knowledge, I'll skip them and only cover the ones that are not. So
Don't apologize. It's a job you have taken on yourself. Just do it.
yes, sir. So T.S. Sharma is asking how to distinguish self-doubt and staying with questions in the process of developing a learning mind.
There is no how. Just start doing it and the ability will come. How did you do mathematics? You started with what is a straight line, what is an angle, what is a circle, and gradually built on that theorem by theorem by theorem. And ultimately, you had a deeper understanding about geometry. Here, it all seems very difficult because you have not done it. You have not worked it. So there is a definition of what is difficult and what is easy. That is easy, which you have learned to do. And that is difficult, which you have not learned. By itself, there is nothing that is easy or difficult. We do very difficult things in our education. But here we have not really given our heart and mind to this inquiry. And we just want that in one lecture or one video which we listen to, that this thing should happen. Sorry, it won't happen. If you live with it, that's why it is hard work. That hard work is to constantly live with this learning mind. That's the hard work. Because normally one is wanting pleasure, one is wanting distractions and so on. Not that there is anything wrong with that. When you are doing that, also watch. So there is this famous verse from the Upanishad, which is worth contemplating on. It says, there are two birds sitting on a tree. The first bird is nibbling at the fruit and tasting the bitterness or sweetness of it. The second bird is only watching what this first bird is doing. And the learning comes from the second bird. The human consciousness is both these birds in one. First bird represents the ego. It is pain and pleasure and all that. It's experiencing all that. Second bird is awareness. It's just watching what's going on. And it is from this watching that the verse says the learning comes. Self-knowledge comes from the watching. That is precisely what Krishnaji is trying to tell us. But we are not used to that. We are not used to a witness consciousness. We are habituated to interfere, to do something, to measure, to say, I can do it better, and so on. You bring in yourself. So the observer is the observed is something you have to perceive for yourself. If it is just an idea in your head, very superficial. It is a knowledge of something Krishnamurti said, but you have not found the truth of that. It's like knowing, having the ability to define Newton's laws without knowing what they really mean. Exactly the same thing here. To know exactly what it means that the observer is observed, you will need to inquire into this and work hard at it in order to come upon that perception. And if you haven't, then in your opinion, it is not so, which is also all right. That's your opinion, but doubt that opinion too. Doubt Krishnamurti too, what he is saying. He could be mistaken. I'm not saying this. He often said that himself. He said, sir, I could be mistaken. Don't accept what I say. So you have also to understand that authority has no meaning in this quest. As authority has very little meaning in science too. Because without that test of the scientific method, nothing is accepted. Whoever may have said it.
Sir, we talked about the importance of perception. And Shakti Kumarji is asking this interesting question that Krishnamurti invites us to think, as in think on these things or think together. And yet, if the analysis is paralysis, what is this nature of thinking which is not analytical?
All inquiry begins with thinking. If you don't think at all, you don't have any question in your mind, there is no inquiry. But if the inquiry ends with thinking and with more ideas and so on, you have ashes. It won't transform consciousness, it will just transform the ideas in your head, which is some kind of mental property that you hold in your brain. So this quest is for going from all this analysis and inquiry. When he talks about going beyond, he's talking about perception. come upon perception. And I gave in a previous talk a interesting metaphor that explains this, which was that knowledge and reason, the intellect, is like the pole of the pole vaulter. It can raise you, create new questions and so on. But if you don't leave the pole, you don't get to the other side. It's exactly like that. You begin with inquiry, it may be intellectual, but if you remain with the intellect and you remain with the answers, you have just a collection of knowledge in your head. To get to the other side, you must go from there to perception of what is being pointed out. That is the pathless bit. So that is why truth is pathless. The idea of the truth is not pathless. You have paths to it.
So as you said, the truth is pathless.
The right place of thought and analysis is in creating the question at deeper and deeper levels. But it can't answer the question.
So Sumitraji is asking that being open, inquire, and being tentative and humble is important in that. Then what then is truth? And is there absolute truth at all?
We have a whole talk about it, and I'm not going to give it now. There is a talk which says, "Is truth a pathless land?" So in that talk, we will go into it in great detail, what truth is and why it is pathless.
Thank you, sir. So Shamal Ravji have a question on, I think, yesterday's talk. He's saying technology is a byproduct of science and orthodoxy is a byproduct of religion. Is orthodoxy because of fear and insecurity?
Well, the great teachers never created a church or a temple or a religion, giving do this, don't do this, and so on. They raised certain important questions and they came upon a very different consciousness from which they spoke. The followers, instead of trying to find out how to come upon the consciousness which the teacher is talking from, made the mistake of saying we are followers, we will spread his word, make him into a hero, start worshipping him, create a temple and a church and a pope who tells you what to do, what not to do. So you have experts, you have authoritative books, sacred books written by these people, and so on. And that whole thing becomes a orthodox religion. But it began with the teacher. The teacher Christ didn't come to that consciousness, Christ consciousness, through Christianity. The Buddha didn't come to that Buddhism through Buddhism. The Buddha came to that by inquiring into his conditioning in Hinduism and freeing himself of that conditioning. Jesus Christ grew up as a Jew, must have questioned that and discarded it and come upon something totally new. So the followers, instead of coming upon that state which is totally new, which is free from the past, made the mistake of worshipping the man, saying he is our hero and so on, and created these religions. That's why I have said, it's my view, not Krishnaji has not said this, that the orthodox religions are byproducts of the religious inquiry. The teacher came to it wisdom through the religious inquiry. The followers made a system saying, we will help you to come upon a good life. And you can see the travesty of it. All religions have violence in them, greed in them, selfishness in them. The people of one religion are not different from the people of another religion, but they think they are different. They have different illusions to which they are attached. So the whole thing becomes a travesty of religion. We have had more religious wars and killings, and they are still going on, than even wars over territory and ideology and so on. So beware of orthodox religion. Krishna said, come out of the trap of your own religion. When you are clearing up illusions, there are a lot of illusions coming from your own religion. You have to free yourself of them.
Thank you, sir. Sir, this importance of not succumbing to the division and also friendship. I think Sasha ji has a comment related to that. She's asking, how is what we call friendship is not a friendship?
Because it requires agreement. It requires that your friend must support you, must praise you, must think highly of you. And if he doesn't, it turns into hatred, into deception, into enmity. Therefore, it's not true friendship. Friendship essentially means sharing. Sharing with love, not seeking support. There is a very beautiful statement by Khalil Gibran describing what true friendship is. I can't put it in such beautiful words as he had the competence to do, so I'll quote them for you. He says, let there be no purpose in friendship other than the deepening of the spirit. For love that seeks aught but the disclosure of its own mystery is not love, but a net that is cast forth, and only the unprofitable is caught. So he's saying, when you approach your friend with a beggar bowl, asking for yourself either support or praise or whatever, it's not true friendship. It's a net that you are cast forth. And you may receive it, but it's unprofitable because you will never know what really love and friendship are, so long as you are approaching like that. For people in India, that's what we mean कि मतलबी दोस्त है, हमेशा कुछ मतलब से ही आता है, कभी भी खाली शेयर करने के लिए नहीं आता है. Khalil Gibran is saying the same thing, but in much more beautiful words.
Sir,
It's from the book called The Prophet. Do read it if you have not read it. And if you have read it, please read it again because it's very profound.
thank you, sir. Sir, Komalji has this comment, I think, that she's saying Krishna ji really suggests that books like Gita suggest a path, while he claims that he didn't read any of them. So why have opinion when he didn't read them?
You know, when he separated from the Theosophical Society, Emily Latens, who was like a mother to him, wrote a letter to him saying, "You're opposing the ideas of the Theosophical Society. They brought you up, they educated you, and you are being ungrateful to them," etc. I don't remember the exact words, I'm paraphrasing. And Krishnaji said, replied to that, saying, "Mummy, I'm not opposing the Theosophical Society or its ideas. I'm opposing all ideas and ideals of the world." That's the answer to your question. He's opposing all ideas and ideals of the world, saying that they don't lead to truth.
Sir, Sabuji is saying that we all know Krishna ji himself said that he is not a guru. Then how to introduce him to another?
Give them a book of his, like First and Last Freedom or Think on These Things, and say, read it. If you find it interesting, read more. If you don't, throw it away. Give it away to somebody else. That's all. This is not my words. This is what Krishnaji said himself. Don't try to convert other people to Krishnaji. Krishnaji is not a view. It's an approach to life. Another person may not be interested in approaching life that way. You have no right to interfere with him. Leave him alone. There's an interesting question and answer in this. Krishnaji was asked, "Sir, you're all talking to us. We have already heard you and read your books and so on. You should be talking to the man on the street." And Krishnaji said, "Sir, the man in the street is not interested in this. The question in his mind is, where can I get the best beer? You can't force him to come and do this inquiry. I talk to you because you come and you are interested in this inquiry and you want to talk to me. But it's perfectly all right if you don't want to come." So he's not asking you to come and do this. He's not promising anything. He's saying, if you are interested, you're not trying to understand my teaching, you're trying to understand yourself. And if you find my books useful for learning about yourself, read them. If you don't find them useful, throw them away.
Sir, Parth Singh ji has this question specifically related to memory. He has a comment, a big comment, and then at the end he's asking that I wonder if we could remove all memory, because as science is progressing, we may do as we may do in the future, then we will perceive truth when all memory is erased.
No, sir. Nothing that nature has put there is completely unnecessary. You need thought, you need memory, you need your body, your senses, everything. Nothing has been put there which is not necessary. You have only to find what is your right relationship with it. You need imagination. You need memory. Find out where memory is helpful, where memory is a block. Put it in its right place and that's it. That's the art of living. Same way with thought, the same way with imagination, the same way with science, and so on. Nothing is completely unnecessary. But when you give it too important a place and you use it where it has no value, then it becomes an illusion, and that illusion is the problem. Not the thing in itself, not a problem. Knowledge is not a problem. It becomes a problem because you give it too high a place, and he is wanting to wanting you to put it in its right place. You have to see that it does not bring transformation of consciousness. If you are only interested in transformation of ideas and in knowledge, it's fine. If you are interested in transformation of consciousness, it's trivial. That's all. And don't accept this. Find out if that is so or not. If it is not so, drop it. Say, don't read Krishnamurti anymore. Say it's nonsense. Fine. That's also fine. There's complete freedom. Then nobody is asking that you have to follow this or do this. Indeed, we are all not his followers. If you follow him, you don't follow him, because he said you can't follow another person. It's a very different teaching from all the other teachings and the gurus. He's not offering you anything. He's throwing you back on yourself and saying, you are completely responsible for what happens in your life and in society around you. And if you're interested in self-knowledge, you may find this book of use to you, provided you use it to learn about yourself, not about me or about the teaching. He used to also object whether it really should be called the teaching. He said, sir, we couldn't find any other better word, so we are using the word teaching. But there is no such thing as my teaching.
Sir, we have about 7 to 8 minutes more. Seems there are no more questions. If people have questions, please post them here. Meanwhile, I would like to ask a question, sir.
Sure.
So the importance of group inquiry or a dialogue. It seems that to me, as you laid out the preconditions for how a state of mind could be in a true dialogue. And if people are open-minded and they are sharing and exploring, it seems that they would find something that they didn't know before. And that seems to happen. But then it's not so, or it may not be so much with a greater intensity when you are all by yourself, or someone mentioned self-dialogue. So is there more to a group dialogue than just a self-inquiry? And what is the importance of group dialogue specifically?
When we say you are the world, that means the world is the way it is because you are the way you are. It's also true for the dialogue group. Ultimately, the mind in the dialogue group is the mind of the participants. And the quality of that mind is what it is, actually. If they are argumentative, if they are egoistic, and so on, you will find arguments will arise and dislike will arise, and some quarrel may even take place, and so on. Don't say this should not happen. Because then what will happen is it will become artificial, you will become polite, you will talk nicely to each other and so on, and you won't really learn anything. You can learn from whatever takes place. The quarrel that takes place also creates a question. How come we have learned so much from Krishnamurti and discussed it, and still we are quarreling. That's an honest approach with a learning mind. You approach what takes place with a learning mind. You don't say this should not have taken place. The shoulds and should nots have to be dropped because they have no meaning. It's not something which you can do voluntarily. It happens because of your state of mind, and you can't change that state of mind through your will or through your effort. But it can change if you have a deeper perception of what is true and what is false. So if division occurs between us, it's telling you that we have not really deeply understood the truth. If you have the humility, it will tell you that. Don't say it should not take place, don't suppress it, don't put it under the carpet, which is what there is a tendency to do that. Quarrel takes place, anger comes, jealousy comes. These are jewels from which you have to learn. It's pointing out that we have really not learned. We are not free. And that's the truth. You have to not suppress it, but you have to learn about it. Learn about it meaning, from where does this arise within me? From where did it arise? And you will discover for yourself that there were certain attachments to certain ideas, an assertion, and a feeling that if the other man with different ideas is a crook, and so on, some kind of judgment is taking place. So a whole process is there behind it, and that is the process you have to observe and free yourself of. Now you may say it's taking place in him, it is not taking place in me, but you are not different from him. If it takes place in him, it can also potentially take place in you. The human consciousness functions the same way. He is hurt, therefore it's happening to him. If you are hurt, it will happen to you also. So even though you are watching it between two of your friends, you can learn about yourself from that watching, because their consciousness is not different from your consciousness. So if you have a learning mind, you're not judging that and condemning that, but you are observing that and learning from it for yourself. You can watch other people who are ambitious, who are deeply religious, with belief and all that, traditional religion. Watch them, watch them. You will see the limitation of it, and that applies to you too. So whatever takes place in dialogue, if you approach it with a learning mind, you will learn. And similarly, whatever experience you come across, don't judge the experience and say, this is a good experience, that's a bad experience, this should happen, that should not happen. Don't be a censor. That's what witness consciousness means. Choiceless awareness means you are not choosing, you are not judging. You are just observing. Why are you observing? Because you want to learn about consciousness. And you are observing. When you observe and you learn about your own consciousness, you have learned about the entire human consciousness, because your consciousness is not separate from that of another. Your conditioning is separate. Your illusions are separate, but your consciousness is not separate from that of another.
Thank you so much, sir.
Doesn't belong either to you or to me. Thoughts belong to you or me. Awareness is just awareness.
Thank you. Sir, I think we have ran out of time for today. I have saved the rest of the questions for the next session. So,
come to the end of all questions when you asked yours. Some have come after that, is it?
yes, there are two more. I'm not sure we have time for that, but okay. I have saved. Yes.
So we'll note down those questions, and I'm sure, because these things will come up repeatedly on every issue when you go deeper, you come to the questions of the ego and attachment and all this. So it will come.
Yes.
You'll be able to take them up.
Yes. So this
Thank
is end of sixth session, and then we meet next time in 6 days from today. So thank you everyone, and hope to see you again.
The topic of Saturday. Next Saturday, I think it is global violence and individual responsibility. Is that it?
That is correct, sir. Yes, chapter 16.
Yeah. Okay. See you then.
See you
Until
then.
Saturday, be peaceful, be happy.